Thanks, Jim. It's good to see all of you, some familiar faces and old friends, and also some new faces. I'm looking forward to leading a seminar this summer, and I had two ideas about things that I might do. One is to offer a seminar that might be in some ways derived from and similar to the literature and information seminar that Jim mentioned that I led 2 summers ago. In some ways connected to it, though a little bit different, as I said. This is the Histories and Stories seminar, which again would be concerned with fiction and nonfiction. Excuse me. In particular, the relationship between literature and history, or as I put it, histories and stories. And here we would be interested in thinking about stories without concern, really, about whether those stories are true or not. Thinking about mixing fiction and nonfiction, and blurring that line between those two categories. Our concern would be rather in thinking about how those stories are told, whether they are fictional or non-fictional stories, how they are shaped for audiences, how audiences respond to them, and using the same techniques of reading to think about how those stories are manufactured and how they are received. So we would be reading both fictional, that is literary stories, and non-fictional stories, and asking the same questions of them. I was thinking about considering a wide range of texts under this rubric and through these questions. They would include children's picture books, children's story books, texts, non-fictional and fictional for the very youngest of our students, but also, of course, fiction and nonfiction meant for adults and meant for the oldest students that we teach. I think that the kinds of theoretical questions we could ask when we approach literature, fiction and nonfiction from these perspectives are very interesting, and I think the seminar that I led 2 years ago found this. So we would continue to explore those questions in this seminar. One of the things that we did in that seminar and could continue to do in this one was to think about performance as an aspect of this. We thought about speeches, for example, both fictional and non-fictional. So whether it's Martin Luther King or Shakespeare, to think about what the issue of performance does to words when they are spoken, enacted, whether they are done performed in a fictional context or a non-fictional one. So that's a sense of that seminar. The texts would remain to be established based on teacher interest and my own. So that would it's a little bit open in terms of the particular materials we'd be looking at, but those would be the range of questions we would bring to the materials that we would study. The other idea I had was to consider a seminar that would treat the illustrated page, as I put it, that is to say, objects that involve both words and pictures. And the questions there would be, how do we approach such objects, and how do we think about the mixing of those two representational systems, visual ones and verbal ones? What does it mean? How does it change things when we put words and pictures together? And I have in mind thinking about a wide range of such objects over a huge historical span. So I'd like to think about medieval objects, things such as the Bayeux Tapestry, the famous tapestry that tells the story of the Norman conquest through words and pictures, pictures of the soldiers coming from France to England and then fighting with captions stitched into the bottom of the tapestry. A wonderful image textual object that tells a very complicated story, both in its words and its pictures. So things like that, things like medieval manuscripts that have texts at their center with illuminations perhaps around the edges. What is the interaction of those words and pictures for a reader looking at that complicated page? What happens when somebody looks at those words and pictures together? But I also want to think about word and picture combinations in a range of other objects much nearer to hand. And I was thinking about looking at things such as Blake's picture books, or Rossetti's paintings that have sometimes pictures, poems, that is to say, in the frames of them, so that a viewer looking at something that is really primarily a painting would nonetheless be confronted with a text to be read in the frame of the painting. What is the balance of text and image? What does it mean when you look at a book that nonetheless has pictures? What does it mean when you look at a painting that nonetheless has words? Those are the kinds of questions we could ask when confronted with an object that has both words and pictures. I also want to take this question to the kinds of image-rich screens that we're all very familiar with. You know, we look at a digital screen and it has both words and pictures. What's the balance of words and pictures there, and what does it mean when we come to expect that anything that we read will have glossy pictures associated with it? Are those pictures just for children, as in children's storybooks, which would also play a part in this seminar? Or do adults have an interest in mixing text and image also? In the digital realm, we expect that text will also be associated with picture. Why is that? What does that mean? What did the pictures do for the texts in that sort of a situation? One of the exciting things about this seminar, I think, is that we would be able to make good use of Yale collections, and so I would expect that we would spend a lot of time in Beinecke Library and the Center for British Art and the Yale University Art Gallery, so we would be able to look at objects in all of those places that combine words and images as we thought about these representational systems and how they work, and how we might use such complex objects in the classroom to get students to think about how representational systems work when they are complicated by the mixing of text and image. So those are two ideas I had for seminars, and I'm very happy to talk with all of you about questions about them. Looking forward to leading one of them this summer.